She told me to open my ranch gate, or she'd call the cops on my wife. What she didn't know, my wife is who the cops call. And that was just the beginning of Darlene Prickle's very public, very legal unraveling. A dangerous woman is threatening me at Bishop Ranch. That's what Darlene told 911. Pure lies, but she didn't know who my wife really was. She didn't know what was going to happen when those cops rolled up. Ever had an HOA president target your property? Comment below, because what happens next had Darlene begging for a do-over. It all started with my rooster and a threat of jail time, two things I never thought would end up in the same sentence. But that's the kind of math you get when your neighborhood HOA is led by Darlene Prickle, a woman who treats bylaws like the 10 Commandments and thinks authority grows faster than weeds. This woman once fined a child for sidewalk chalk and told a World War II vet to repaint his flagpole because it clashed with the hydrangeas. So when she stood at my gate with her iPhone raised like a gavel and shouted, "Open this gate right now or I'm calling the cops on your wife," I realized we were no longer dealing with a neighbor. We were dealing with a cartoon villain in pearls and orthopedic wedges. Now, my wife, Yvette, God bless her, didn't even flinch. She sipped her coffee, looked Darlene dead in the eye, and said, "No warrant, no entry." That should have been the end of it. But Darlene doesn't believe in endings. She believes in escalation. She stomped back to her luxury SUV like it was a getaway car and dialed 911 with the energy of someone who thinks Netflix documentaries are filmed in real time. But she didn't know? Yvette doesn't just respect the law. She trains the people who enforce it. But Darlene was too busy drafting her next neighborhood-wide email blast titled, "Urgent Safety Violation, Unauthorized Chicken Behavior." See, this didn't happen out of the blue. It started with courtesy notices that sounded like they were written by a furious librarian. Your compost aroma exceeds the comfort threshold of the community. Your rooster triggers involuntary startle responses in residents over 60. She even claimed our rain barrel reflected light too aggressively. Every complaint came signed with a flourish and a slogan. "For the good of Cherryfield Estate." Ma'am, you built a dictatorship out of clip art and mulch regulations. I tried ignoring it, I really did, until one day I came home to find her measuring the distance between our barn and the neighbor's hibiscus hedge like she was about to launch a zoning drone. Then came the offer, delivered with muffins so dry they violated basic human rights. "Mr. Bishop," she said, voice as fake sweet as freezer-burned Cool Whip, "have you considered what this land could be worth if it were beautified?" She handed me a packet full of pastel-colored renderings of wine country villas, all of which were conveniently built where my chicken coop currently stands. I told her no, nicely, respectfully, proudly. She just smiled, the way someone smiles when they think they're about to buy your soul at a clearance price. "Everything has a price," she said. "You'll see." That's when I knew Darlene didn't just want the land. She wanted the legacy erased, paved over, and turned into a hot yoga parking lot. But here's what she underestimated. This land has survived 3 generations of drought, storms, and one very angry wild boar. It will survive Darlene Prickle. Because what she doesn't understand, what she never saw coming, is that my wife doesn't call for backup. She is the backup. So when Darlene rolled up with a clipboard, a camera, and a cousin posing as an HOA-certified inspector, she thought she was launching a crusade. She didn't know she'd just started a war she couldn't win. Hit like if your HOA ever confused power with purpose, because the next part, let's just say she's about to meet her match. In uniform. Darlene's favorite phrase was, "for the good of the community." That's HOA for "I personally hate joy." 3 days after the 911 incident, I found a letter in my mailbox that made me choke on my coffee. Notice of odor violation, level 3. Level 3? I didn't even know there were levels. Apparently, according to the Prickle doctrine, level 3 meant persistent barnyard essence that impacts neighbor wellness. I'd never seen such aggressive language used against poultry. My rooster, Captain Cluck, crowed right on cue, like he knew we were under siege. I half expected him to start wearing camo and issuing statements from the coop. But it didn't stop at odors. Darlene launched what she called a Community Standards Rejuvenation Initiative, which was HOA code for Let's Ruin Randall's Week. Overnight, anonymous complaints started multiplying like HOA gremlins. One claimed the chickens were causing auditory trauma. Another accused my compost bin of being a breeding ground for rebellious spores. My personal favorite, emotional damage from clucking. I'd seen war, but never imagined I'd be in a psychological standoff over poultry acoustics. Darlene posted a flyer on every mailbox that read, "Clean air, clear minds," with a smiling cartoon chicken inside a red circle with a slash through it. That's when I realized this wasn't about smell. It was about control. And Darlene wasn't just pushing back. She was preparing to rewrite the rules entirely. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Folks were packed in like sardines, wearing pastel polos in judgment. Darlene sat at the front like she was presiding over a royal court, gavel in hand and smugness in full bloom. I brought a binder thicker than my cousin Jimmy's neck, filled with local farm protection laws, property rights, and documentation of our historical exemption. When I stood to speak, I felt ready, be calm, until Darlene cleared her throat and hit me with Klaus 38B. "According to community standards," she announced, "no natural living sounds are permitted before 9 a.m. No natural living sounds. By that logic, frogs and babies are outlaws." I opened my mouth to respond, but the crowd was already murmuring like they were watching a daytime trial. And Darlene, she leaned back, smiling like a woman who just won bingo with someone else's card. That's when Robert shuffled over to me during a break. He looked like he'd aged a decade since the last meeting, sweating through his collar like it was a hostage situation. "Don't push her," he whispered, eyes darting around. "She did this to the Patterson alpacas. Don't end up like them." Now, I didn't even know the Pattersons had alpacas. Apparently they used to, until Darlene buried them in so many noise complaints and zoning challenges that they sold the whole property and moved to New Mexico. "She's not gonna stop," Robert added, voice shaking. "This ain't about bylaws. It's about buying time for a bigger plan." He walked off before I could respond, looking like a man who'd seen things. I got home to find another note taped to my gate. "Violation escalated to formal review. Coop hazard allegation." And inside the envelope, a 200-page printout labeled Operation Coop Shutdown. It had tabs, it had bullet points, it had surveillance photos of my chickens mid-strut, labeled with phrases like high-velocity peck zone. Darlene wasn't just filing complaints anymore. She was compiling a case, and if the smell of tyranny had a name, it was printed in pink ink with a custom HOA logo at the top. She didn't just file a complaint, she filed a 200-page dossier called Operation Coop Shutdown. Don't go anywhere, 'cause next she sent someone to inspect my shed, and spoiler alert, he bought his badge on Etsy. Drop if you've ever smelled a setup coming before the chickens even noticed. Imagine waking up to find a man in aviators photographing your compost pile, and he's whistling the Cops theme. It was exactly 7:00 a.m. Monday morning when a white SUV pulled up like it was part of a reality show no one asked to be in. Out came Darlene Prickle, dripping smugness and sunscreen, flanked by a younger man in cargo shorts and a neon vest that screamed discount traffic cone. "This is Chad," she announced, like she was introducing a courtroom expert. "Our certified HOA inspector." Chad gave me a lazy two-finger wave and immediately started circling my property, snapping photos like my compost bin was under federal investigation. I couldn't tell if the man was doing a job or just vibing with my tomato vines. He had a clipboard, sure, but it had unicorn stickers and the words, "Let's get official," written in glitter pen. I asked where his credentials were, and Darlene whipped out a laminated sheet from a folder titled Operation Co-op Shutdown. The paper said, "Certified Property Sanitation and Harmony Inspector," issued by an online course that sounded like it came with a free smoothie coupon. "He touched a goat at Burning Man," she added proudly, as if that qualified him to analyze poultry wellness. Chad nodded and said, "Yeah, I've seen things." Then he walked straight into my garden, looked at a zucchini and said, "This one looks aggressive." I reminded them both calmly that under state law they couldn't inspect anything without a court order. Darlene's smile cracked just slightly, but she pressed on like a malfunctioning Roomba. "We're here for a routine check. Just let us in, Mr. Bishop." I stayed calm. I'd been coached by Yvette to expect this kind of bait. I pointed to the private property "No trespassing without warrants" sign, then to my camera mounted above the gate. Chad squinted up at it like he thought it might shoot lasers. "Suspicious poultry behavior," he muttered, writing something on his clipboard with a crayon. I asked them both to leave. Darlene stepped closer to the fence, heels clicking like a countdown to chaos. "You're obstructing an official inspection," she snapped. "I'll be reporting this to the community board," I replied, "and I'll be forwarding this circus to my lawyer and the state ag commissioner." That's when it happened. Darlene suddenly gasped, clutched the fence like she was starring in a soap opera, and pretended to fall backward onto the gravel. "He pushed me," she shrieked like an ambulance was already on its way. Chad, bless him, dropped his phone twice trying to get the scene on video. Robert, who had arrived quietly and stood to the side, looked like he was having an out-of-body experience. "I need help," Darlene screamed, pulling out her phone. "A dangerous man just assaulted me." I hadn't moved a muscle. I was still standing behind the gate. She wasn't even on my property. But that didn't stop her from dialing 911 and sobbing like I'd pushed her down Mount Everest. Within 15 minutes, the sheriff's office sent out 2 deputies who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. One of them recognized me from the farmer's market. "Morning, Randall," he said, eyeing the scene. "Another chicken incident?" I explained everything calmly while Darlene kept moaning into her phone like she was auditioning for Law & Order Poultry Victims Unit. The officer reviewed the security footage from my camera, clear as day, and rubbed his temples. "Ma'am," he finally said, "you're not even on his property and he never touched you." Darlene gasped like someone canceled Christmas. "This is an outrage. He was menacing me with egg energy." Robert looked like he might faint. Chad asked if this meant they had to cancel the co-op inspection. "I don't get it." "And a noble, no, a Halloween vestige. Drop your favorite fake job title in the comments, because what happens when this footage hits social media? Let's just say it ain't great for Darlene's political ambitions." The HOA's new Facebook group, Safe Cherryfield, but nothing about it was safe, especially the memes. By 3 p.m. that same Monday, I was already infamous in a digital kangaroo court called Safe Cherryfield, which should have been named Karen's Courtroom of Emotional Overreaction. Darlene posted a chopped and screwed video of the inspection assault, so heavily edited it looked like a foreign film trailer. She added dramatic violin music, slow motion, and the caption, "Aggressive rancher snaps, is your family safe?" Someone subtitled it in Comic Sans. And just like that, my neighbors turned into Yelp reviewers for my soul. I was no longer Randall Bishop, third-generation farmer. I was Eggman, the rooster radical. The comments section turned into a suburban war zone. One lady suggested I be put on a noise offender watch list. A guy named Todd wrote he should be exchanged for a crate of kale. Someone even started a change.org petition to protect our property lines from poultry aggression. It had 140 signatures in an hour. One woman asked if my eggs contained residual anger. I didn't even know you could emotionally profile a chicken. My hens were just out there living their best clucking lives while the internet debated if I should be allowed to grow cucumbers near children. The group's new banner was a photo of Darlene hugging a tree with the text, "Courage in the face of claws." By Wednesday, my phone stopped buzzing for orders. Our best egg contract, 5 years strong, emailed me with the cold professionalism of a breakup text. "We're going in a different direction. Best of luck." The organic grocery store removed us from their vendor list. Even the church choir, which I donated produce to every summer, unfriended me on Facebook. It wasn't just cancel culture, it was compost. My good name was being turned into fertilizer, and not the good kind. Even my chickens sensed the vibe. They started clucking suspiciously every time I checked my notifications, as if to say, "You brought this on us, sir." Yvette tried to cheer me up by reminding me we still had the security footage and legal records. Truth always wins, she said, sipping coffee like a general sipping battle whiskey, but truth, as it turns out, is like a tortoise with a limp. Meanwhile, HOA gossip rides a scooter powered by espresso and inherited resentment. I uploaded the full video, the one where Darlene flops like she's on a cruise ship deck, onto our farm's Facebook page. It got 32 shares and 10 laughing reactions. Meanwhile, Safe Cherryfield was up to 1,200 members and counting. At this rate, Darlene was going to get a verified badge before I could sell another tomato. That night, I sat in my barn staring at an unopened flash drive Robert had slipped me during the meeting. He hadn't said a word, just passed it with the guilt-ridden hands of a man tired of sleeping next to a conscience. The label read, "Proof," just that. One word, heavy like a thundercloud. I plugged it into my laptop and braced for impact. Posted a meme of me titled, "Eggman, the Rooster Radical." Hit that like if your HOA's ever gone digital dictator, because what's on that flash drive? Let's just say the chickens weren't the only ones being watched. Robert Hayes looked like a man who aged 3 presidencies in one HOA meeting, and now he was at my gate. He didn't say a word, just handed me a plain envelope, nodded like he was being watched by invisible HOA drones, and shuffled back to his Prius like it was his last act of defiance before entering witness protection. The envelope had no note, no greeting, just a thumb drive and a sticky note that said, "Play immediately. Clear your schedule." That's how you know a storm's coming, not with thunder, but with paper silence. I locked the door, unplugged the toaster, just in case Darlene had found a way to hack it, and plugged the drive into my laptop with the kind of dread usually reserved for tax audits and family reunions. The folder inside was titled Cherryfield Harmony Project, which sounds like something that would involve candles and a harp, but no. It was a digital dumpster fire, dozens of files, PDFs, emails, scanned handwritten notes, all detailing a 3-year HOA operation that made Watergate look like a group text. There were fake noise citations backdated to 2020, minutes from emergency board votes, that never happened, and a treasure map of bribery, gift cards, Botox packages, and HOA-sponsored brunches in exchange for silence. It read like Darlene's personal villain monologue, just without the dramatic lighting. She'd been orchestrating the takedown of every property with acreage, targeting the ones with animals first. Why? Because livestock lowers prestige, her words, not mine. And then, the golden goose pun absolutely intended, a PowerPoint presentation, yes, a PowerPoint, titled, Prickle Down Property Strategic Acquisition Plan. Slide 1, My Farm. Slide 2, a digital rendering of a 500-acre eco-luxury wellness retreat featuring kombucha tasting domes, rejuvenation lagoons, and a goat-free experience. Goat-free. That was personal. There was even a chart labeled Obstacle, Randall Bishop, with bullet points like uncooperative, legally informed, still owns Pitchfork. This wasn't an HOA. This was a hostile takeover disguised in potluck flyers and neighborly smiles. And sitting on the board of Prickle Down Property LLC, Darlene Prickle, her second ex-husband, and, because why not, her third cousin named Kip. There was a shaky video file labeled I Can't Anymore, PMP4, from someone who sounded like Darlene's assistant, narrating documents while chain-smoking near a cat. She whispered about rigged inspections, rigged elections, and how she once photoshopped a cracked sidewalk to cite a grandmother for trip hazards. By the end, she said, "If you're watching this, I've probably been reassigned to HOA Hell," also known as the Landscaping Committee. I sat there staring at my screen, realizing this wasn't just about chickens or noise or odors. This was about greed, about legacy, about turning my grandfather's barn into a parking lot for kombucha-fueled influencers named Skylar. I backed up every file to 5 separate drives and hid them like I was starring in a low-budget spy thriller, because once you find out you're the last puzzle piece in a multi-million-dollar scam, you stop sleeping and start printing. I knew then Darlene hadn't overstepped. She detonated. I forwarded the drive to Yvette. Her reply was 3 words. "We're bringing fire." Darlene's assistant dropped a USB in my mailbox labeled "I can't anymore, MP4M mail flat. If you're ready for the takedown, because tomorrow at 3 p.m., the badge hits the table and somebody's kombucha empire is going sour." Yvette Bishop wasn't just my wife, she was the reason state officials checked their emails twice. I always thought Yvette was just really organized. You know, color code grocery lists, separate drawers for batteries by voltage, and a weird habit of triple-checking legal language and HOA bylaws while drinking chamomile tea. Turns out, she wasn't organizing our pantry, she was organizing a statewide takedown of HOA corruption. I found this out when she slid a manila folder across the kitchen table labeled Operation Birdcage. Inside, names, photos, bank statements, and a flowchart that looked like the opening credits of a conspiracy documentary. I blinked twice. "You're undercover?" She sipped her tea. "Technically, I'm Chief Inspector of Public Integrity, but yes, I also make great pancakes." For 8 months, my wife had been leading a covert investigation into weaponized HOA abuse across the state. She had whistleblower files from 3 counties, 14 sworn affidavits, 5 sealed indictments, and a Google Drive folder named Kombucha Mafia. The flash drive Robert gave me? Just a cherry on top. "Darlene isn't just crooked," Yvette explained. "She's profitable. HOA fines have been funneled into shell companies. Property seizures flipped for profit. It's racketeering in a pantsuit." I stared at her like she'd grown a cape. All those times she said, "Trust me," I thought she meant emotionally. She meant federally. The plan was simple. Well, simple in a Netflix finale kind of way. Darlene had scheduled an emergency HOA violation hearing for 3:00 p.m. Friday to vote on sanctions against me. But Yvette had timed everything perfectly. At exactly 2:59, 5 unmarked government vehicles would pull into the Cherryfield Community Center parking lot. Officers would serve warrants for fraud, extortion, false reporting, and abuse of HOA. "We let her feel like she's winning," Yvette said, flipping through the arrest script like it was a birthday speech. "Then we pull the rug and watch her trip on her own bylaws." I still couldn't wrap my head around it. My wife, the woman who alphabetized our spice rack, was about to lead a federal sting operation on a woman who once fined us for unapproved porch gnomes. Yvette pulled out a pressed uniform I'd never seen before. It was navy blue with gold trim, with a badge that didn't look local. "This is the dress code for justice," she winked. "And yes, it goes with the earrings." That night, she briefed the team while cooking lasagna, talking about surveillance logs and federal code violations, in the same tone she used for grocery coupons. Friday morning, the air felt heavy like a courtroom breath. I put on the shirt Yvette picked, blue plaid, subtle intimidation. She loaded her folder into a government-issued briefcase and kissed me like she was about to testify in Congress. "Remember," she said, brushing lint off my shoulder, "don't sign anything, don't flinch, and whatever Darlene throws at you, just stall until 2:59. I nodded, still unsure if I was a husband or a civilian asset at this point. We drove separately. She said it looked less suspicious. I pulled into the community center lot with exactly 5 minutes to spare, and as I walked through the door, Darlene greeted me with that same venom-laced smile and said, "Mr. Bishop, you'll sign this or you'll lose everything you love." Sometimes your spouse isn't being secretive. She's just too busy drafting indictments to talk about dinner. If you're ready for the boardroom ambush of the century, when the clock struck 2:59, justice arrived in gold trim, and Darlene's world went sideways. Darlene opened that meeting like she was hosting The Price is Right. Unfortunately, today's prize was 8 felony counts. The conference table had more bottled water and passive-aggressive energy than a tech startup's HR mediation. Darlene sat at the head like a Bond villain with a coupon book flanked by 2 lawyers and a giant folder labeled Final Resolution. "Mr. Bishop," she purred, "let's avoid further embarrassment. We're offering you market rate, minus litigation fees, emotional damage, and the poultry depreciation index. I didn't even blink. I just watched the clock tick to 2:59 like I was waiting for a divine lightning strike, and honey, did it come with boots on. At 3:00 p.m. sharp, the double doors burst open like someone had ordered justice à la carte. Yvette entered in full dress blues, followed by 5 state officers with expressions like unpaid IRS agents. The whole room jerked like someone had unplugged the simulation. "Mrs. Prickle," Yvette announced, her voice smoother than Darlene's foundation, "you're under investigation for conspiracy, racketeering, and multiple counts of HOA overreach, with intent to extort." One of Darlene's lawyers let out a noise that can only be described as legal wheezing. The other started inching his chair away like he'd just remembered he left soup on the stove. Darlene, bless her delusions, stood up like she still had control. "This is an outrage. I will not be intimidated by badge-carrying chicken sympathizers." Yvette raised a brow. "Is that your official statement?" Darlene started flipping through her papers like they might morph into a spellbook. "Where's Robert, I demand?" And boom. Right on cue, Robert Hayes stood from the far end of the table, adjusting his glasses like a man ready to unload 10 years of regret. "You want the truth, Darlene?" he said. "Because I brought receipts, spreadsheets, and a backup on Google Drive." What followed was part courtroom drama, part soap opera, and part farm-to-table karma. Robert detailed everything: the falsified minutes, the backdoor property flips, the HOA slush fund disguised as a neighborhood beautification grant. One officer laid out a stack of bank records so thick it needed its own zip code. Yvette held up a printout showing Prickle Down Property LLC wired funds from seized HOA homes, one of them being Mrs. McCreary's retirement cottage. Darlene's hands started twitching like someone had plugged her into a lie detector. These are lies! You people have no authority here," she shouted. One of the officers just nodded and handed her a neatly folded warrant, like it was a wedding invitation. Sometimes all it takes to beat corruption is a man with principles, and a woman with subpoena power. As the cuffs clicked on, Darlene let out a shriek that could peel wallpaper. "This is a political hit job by the deep poultry state," she screamed. Her lawyer promptly fainted. I stood in the corner quietly sipping my lemon water like I was watching a live-action soap opera reboot called The Real Housewives of Justice County. As they led her away, I couldn't help but whisper, "Bok bok, baby." She didn't hear it, but the camera guy from Channel 9 sure did. When your HOA lawyer faints mid-sentence, you know justice is working smash. That comment section, because the hens aren't the only ones clucking now, and we're not done yet. 6 months later, the hens are local celebrities. They have fan mail and a TikTok, and honestly, better PR than I do. Darlene Prickle is now 6 months into her 6-year sentence at a facility that does not offer kale lattes or parking validation. Word has it she tried starting an inmate HOA. It was immediately shut down after she fined someone for walking with excessive intent. Meanwhile, her dream kombucha spa resort? Bulldozed. In its place now blooms a community garden run by seniors and supervised by chickens with honorary name tags. You haven't lived until you've watched a 12-year-old thank a Rhode Island Red named Cheryl for helping him pull weeds. The HOA was restructured under the fearsome but fabulous Dorothy Winslow, former third-grade teacher, current justice-seeking grandmother, and founding president of the Quilted Gavel Club. Dorothy doesn't run meetings. She conducts them like a Supreme Court hearing mixed with Sunday pie tastings. The bylaws now include things like no backdoor land grabs and every neighbor shall bring cookies. She doesn't carry a gavel, she carries a clipboard, a glare that melts granite, and a framed photo of Darlene captioned, "Don't be this." I nominated her for sainthood. The Pope hasn't responded. Yet, as for the farm, we're so backlogged on orders we had to hire 2 part-timers and a retired auctioneer to manage the calls. The chickens now have their own merch line, Excellent Justice tote bags, Cluck the System hats, and a surprisingly popular calendar featuring our most photogenic hen, Meryl Cheap, We even hosted a farm justice festival with a bounce house shaped like Darlene's Mercedes and a dunk tank for HOA lawyers. A local news anchor called it a strange but satisfying chapter in small-town land reform. I call it healing. But here's the kicker. 2 weeks ago, a state senator showed up unannounced, said his grandma forwarded him our viral video. After a long walk through the tomato rows and a respectful nod to the co-op, he made it official. Bishop Ranch is now a protected agricultural landmark. No HOA, developer, or kombucha warlord can touch it again. Then he dropped the real surprise. Legislation had passed banning HOAs from harassing agricultural landowners. It's called the Bishop Act. I chucked on my lemonade. He laughed and said, "Not every bill gets named after a farmer with Wi-Fi and guts. Sometimes the loudest crow isn't the rooster, it's justice, with a megaphone and a warrant." We celebrated with homemade pie, a mariachi band that included a tuba-playing rooster impersonator, and a group toast led by Dorothy herself. To the land, to the law, and to the loudmouth birds that saved us all. And maybe, just maybe, that's the lesson. Not every victory wears a badge. Sometimes it wears feathers, clucks on cue, and doesn't care one bit about property values. Oh, and Robert? He's now the ethics chair for the new HOA. His first act was to outlaw leaf blowers and require all votes to be signed, recorded, and announced by a chicken. So now, every morning when the roosters crow and the sunrise spills over Bishop Ranch, I don't just see chickens. I see resilience. I see 3 generations of sweat turned into legacy. And I see my wife, Yvette, out by the coop, sipping coffee with a federal badge in one hand and a cracked egg in the other, living proof that justice isn't just an idea. Sometimes it's your partner in crime fighting. And if you've listened this far, maybe this story wasn't just about chickens, HOAs, or a woman named Darlene who weaponized a clipboard. Maybe it was about not giving up when the system seems rigged, about standing your ground even when your voice shakes, and about how one small farm in the middle of nowhere can punch back hard enough to echo through state law. Let this be a reminder, your story matters, even if it starts with a chicken coop. Your voice matters, especially when they try to silence it. And sometimes the biggest victories are won by staying rooted in what's right. If you believe justice can still win, even against an HOA with a God complex, then, like this story, drop a comment with the wildest HOA story you've ever heard or survived. And make sure to subscribe, because the next one, let's just say it involves a lawn color violation, a retired judge, and a bouncy castle in contempt of court. See y'all next time. And remember, never underestimate a chicken with a legal team.